Everybody, welcome back. Full house, whole team plus one, X's and Noles, presented by Noles247.com. We are in the thick, just right between the meaty cheeks of spring practice right now. There's a lot of content, and that's why we had to bring everybody back. Kevin's back from a quick sabbatical. We've got Adam Brown. We've got myself, Shay Rowland, and we've got the new wonderkind of Noles247.com, Clay the Fink. Clay, what's up, my man? A pleasure to have you with us.
I'm excited to be here. Been watching since I've been watching Florida State football, so
that's good. Okay, you said been watching, did a pause there. I didn't know if you were going to come clean on some voyeuristic habit you have, but you've been watching football. That's fine. And the excitement is leaking out of your voice. You're getting me amped up, just natural electricity. I cannot wait. And we are going to be talking about the defensive line, so I am stoked. I cannot wait. Clay, I'm gonna kick it to you. You've got to see these guys live the most out of everybody. Kevin's got to see them at a workout. Adam and I have got to see them from afar, watching the videos, the clips. We've read the sterling practice reports by the guys at Noles247.com. If you haven't done that, you're uninformed and people don't like you. But Clay, you got to put your peepers on these guys. What has been your first impressions of this defensive line unit, a unit that is losing a lot of very talented pieces? Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse. What do you think so far about what you've seen from this group?
So the first thing I always like to preface whenever I give a major practice takeaway, especially when comparing to the year before. So I've never been to the practices, so I'm comparing it to the game stuff, which is a much smaller sample size, especially for the younger guys. Considering there were so many veterans taking up a lot of the majority of snaps at different positions last year. The other guys, Dane, Chris, Brendan, all have a little bit more exposure to them.
Sure.
But with that said, by far, in my opinion, the biggest standout maybe on
no, don't waffle. I like you started off hot and you kind of wavered.
Just go, we only got 5 practices so far, or 6 practices so far. But is Grady Kelly, defensive tackle. He has been
interesting.
I think myself and others kind of penciled him into like a Malcolm Ray, Dennis Briggs sort of role, potentially defensive tackle for, thinking they're sort of banking on Daniel Lyons or maybe KJ Sampson taking that next step and filling not quite the Fabian Lovett role, because you're not always going to give as many snaps to a defensive tackle off the bench when you don't have when they're not as good as Fabian Lovett
right,
is.
Exactly.
But I think Grady Kelly can fill that third defensive tackle role. He's not Braden Fisk, but I think that's the comparison. I think he's like 60% of Braden Fisk.
6/10 of a Braden. Okay.
I don't know. That's I don't even know. I said that the other day, 60%. But the biggest thing is the combination of the strength and quickness. And the centers have had a really rough time with him in practice because of the combination. He's got most of them beat in both areas, and he's very coachable. Very coachable. I mean, every time I see him not even make a mistake, just, have a room for improvement on a rep, they'll say something, and the next rep, the coaches are jumping up and down clapping because of how well he executed what they just talked about. I mean, it's every time I watch the defensive tackle drills. But he's very coachable. He's got a ton of pass rush moves, which I didn't really see on tape that much at Colorado State. And I really didn't see the quickness. I didn't think he was as strong as he is, and he's still you have to work your way up the depth chart as a newcomer, so he's not always going up against the best of the best every single rep.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, he looks like he belongs, like more than belongs so far, and that is certainly exceeded my expectations, and I think he can be like a serious contributor. Once again, not Braden Fisk, maybe a little bit more stout in the run game, a little bit more consistent, not some of the high-end plays where he's, just completely crossing the face of offensive lineman to get into the backfield and make a tackle for loss. But a little bit more play strength, a little bit more consistency in that sort of Braden Fisk type of mold. But he's been definitely the biggest standout.
It's good to hear you say that, and it's something like when we evaluated his tape, a lot of the same observations you did, like a solid like innings eater type of a defensive tackle, 250 snaps a year, a steady, reliable hand. To hear you have more than that, I think is very positive. Kev, I want to kick it to you. Good to have you back, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. All things considered.
I miss that tone of your voice. It's nice. It's good to have it back. It's like an auditory blanket. So, we're going to stick with the interior of the defensive line. Kev, what do you think the strength was of Florida State's interior of the defensive line last year? Do you think that, I mean, they're largely carrying, but like we said, losing Braden Fisk and Fabian Lovett, keeping Josh Farmer, who's not here in the spring, which is why we're not probably going to talk about him too much. But Darrel Jackson, he is going to be fully felt. The full force of D-Jax is going to be felt. What did the defensive line do really good last year? What were they not so great at, in your opinion? And what kind of production are you expecting this year? How important, like how good does that position group have to be for Florida State to have a competent defense in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Before I get too far, I do want to address Clay's thing, which is, if you're getting that, that's a big deal. We watched his film. We did a film review of him, a couple weeks ago. We put it out, and to be honest, like he wasn't popping off on the film, and there were times when you're like, what are they going to be getting out of this Grady Kelly kid? And so, if he's taking that step, that's really big because there are question marks behind that front line. I fortunately have gotten to watch, Darrel Jackson in practice a lot last season. And I think he's going to be pretty special. I mean, I've been pretty on the front line of saying this guy's going to be a pretty good player. I had a very similar experience when he walked onto the roster, like I had with Johnny Wilson. When, he stepped in, you just didn't see that kind of body type at that position. You don't see 6'7", 330 pounds being carried like that very often. And he stood out. And so I think that he was in the process, kind of like what you saw with, Patrick Payton when he first got in here, where he was underweight and he had to gain a lot of weight early. And when he first gained that weight, it might not have all been great weight. And he kind of lost a little bit of the twitchiness initially, but as that weight kind of settled and as he gained strength and kind of continued growing into that weight, that twitchiness came back, and it came back with an extra component of strength. I think you're going to see that with Darrel Jackson, where, when he was at Miami, he put on a bunch of weight really fast. He was at Maryland, then he went to Miami, put on a bunch of weight, and you could see that strength kind of in that frame at Miami. And he was a true kind of power player, but now he's had 2 years under Coach Storms. And, you're going to see that kind of weight turn into good weight, turn into explosive weight. And I think you're going to see someone who's just a true, not only a block eater, but I think he's going to be someone that can penetrate in the backfield and be someone that can kind of make that difference for you on the interior. And then you have Josh Farmer, and you know what you're going to get out of Josh Farmer. I think he's had some ups and downs. I think there are times when he looks like an All-American and times when, he kind of struggles more than he has any right to. And I think he's got to figure that out. But, your top two guys, they're going to be, I'm not afraid to say that I think Darrel Jackson's going to be drafted, and I think he's going to be drafted fairly high if he continues to play to his physical potential, like I saw in practice last year.
Adam, I got something to ask you. How do you feel about this unit? I have a feeling that we kind of touched on, we talked about Grady Kelly. We know what Josh Farmer can do. Had some very impressive games early in the season before, I believe it was that thumb injury. You could tell he started to look limited from there, but that coincided with the time that Braden Fisk picked up. We've talked about, and I feel like this is going to be a theme of this entire unit. I think we all feel pretty confident this is going to be a very stout unit against the run. What do you feel about Kev mentioned that Darrel Jackson has the potential to be a disruptor? Are you worried about the pass rush abilities of the interior of this defensive line, the ability to shoot gaps, to disrupt, to get an interior pass rush, to help an edge unit that is very competent, but maybe doesn't have the ceiling level talent that we're accustomed to seeing at Florida State?
I'll be honest, the news or the breakdown from Clay of Grady Kelly's game thus far makes me less concerned, because that's an encouraging thing to hear, because I don't think that Josh Farmer and Darrel Jackson are true pass rushing type defense tackles. Like we've seen Josh do it some, and he's adequate at it, but it's not his strength. His strength is being stout against the run. Darrel's the same way. I mean, at some point their pass rush strength comes because they're just physical freaks, and it's not from explosive get-offs and pass rush moves. So it's encouraging to hear that maybe Grady is going to fill that one gap, get up the field type that they had from Braden Fisk last year, because it did seem like they were missing that. Daniel Lyons is a guy that I think has some pass rush upside.
Yeah.
But it's probably TBD whether he's ready to take that next step as far as being a featured role player. So that's a development that kind of needs to be watched as they get through the rest of spring and then through summer and then into the season. I mean, yeah, I think pass rush is my biggest concern on the defense. It's one of those areas that they went out and got all these guys, and you got Marvin Jones Jr., and it's a guy who has some pass rush pedigree coming out of high school, and he has some of that. He's real twitched up. He looks like the type that can rush the passer, but we've not seen it from him yet in his time at Georgia. But he was also being asked to do some different things there, so we'll see how he's transitioning into playing out of a three-point stance all the time and playing a true defensive end position as opposed to being dropped in coverage and whatnot like he was at Georgia. Pat Payton, it seems as though he's taking the next step. I still would like to see what that looks like for him as being the man. He's always been a guy that had some pass rush ability, but was kind of known more for batting balls down than getting to the quarterback. So we'll see how that translates when he is the number one focus for a team. When teams start to, you think about Jared Verse and Jermaine Johnson, they had tight ends chipping, they had backs chipping. They were
a lot of attention.
They were constant attention for the offense. How's Pat handle that? How does he handle that mentally? Because that's something you have to get prepared for going into a game. It's my biggest worry. There's guys there. It sounds like Jaden Jones is continuing to be a guy that Mike Norvell hypes up, the JUCO prospect from last year who he was recovering from a pretty gruesome knee injury. Yes, that's Mike's type for those that are snickering now in the background. We'll see. I wish they would go out and get a certified dude that's rush the quarterback a little bit, whether that be a defensive tackle or defensive end. I think it's a spot they need to continue to try to answer post spring, but we'll see if they do. I mean, the job of this front really is to stop the run. This is a light box defense. They want to stop the run with this front. Seems like they've built a group that's going to do that at the bare minimum.
So
go ahead, buddy.
Can I kind of address that question? Like the main question was, are we going to have a defensive tackle like Braden Fisk that can help the defensive ends? And that kind of brings me to, last year you brought in this transfer guy that both played some defensive end and some defensive tackle, and you put him at defensive tackle and you said, you go be just a super athletic defensive tackle.
Right.
This year you found someone that fits that mold, albeit it's a little bit more slanted towards the defensive end with being closer to, 270 instead of 300.
Oh, you must be talking about Tomiwa.
Clay,
I think he's
Tomiwa
280 this spring. I think he's 280.
Can Tomiwa be the Braden Fisk this year? The guy that they put in at that 3-tech in passing situations.
Repping Delaware, baby.
To help.
Proudly, I'm sure, as well, Adam.
To help the pass rush out. Help those defensive ends like Braden Fisk was able to do in third down situations.
I don't want to speak in absolutes because I do not have any inside information on this like my coworkers might, but he's been getting reps at both like inside and outside, which is something that Coach Fuller said preseason, both on the podcast, I think with Brendan and in interviews they were going to experiment with. I've been a little bit more impressed with his work on the inside. He's still adjusting to both. He's had his lumps in positional drills at both positions. But I think we'll find out what they think of what he can do as an interior player when the spring portal hits. No inside information, but I think they're getting a pretty good idea of what that looks like in practice right now. And I think the coaches seem to be enjoying what they're seeing, just like I am from Grady Kelly. So I think they're probably feeling more confident in one of those defensive tackle rotational roles. But, could that be a permanent home for Tomiwa? If it is, they probably aren't going to pursue a defensive tackle in the spring portal. And I think if you see them bring someone in, that means that they've determined that he's going to be more of the edge rusher, big edge rusher, and maybe he does still kick inside from time to time.
It's interesting too, because I believe Fuller actually talked about Sione Loloheia playing inside some also, and it seemed as though he insinuated that it was going to be Sione that played inside more than Tomiwa entering the season, and we'll see how those things kind of progress as they go along here. But that's intriguing to me, because he's not 280. He's not built, but I mean,
No.
Pro teams will do it with some of these. They're not they're bigger, but not super big, like 5-tech type defensive ends that you would see in the NFL. Like I could think of the Eagles did it with Brandon Graham a ton. But you don't see it as much in college. So I'd be curious to see what Sione looked like lining up inside as like a 3-tech. It really, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, this reminds me of what they had at Memphis before Fuller and Mike Norvell came over. They had a massive 280, 290 defensive end on one side. When they were playing this true hybrid stuff.
Fox.
Yeah, the Fox. What does the Fox say?
It takes me back.
And they just blitz like crazy. And it kind of makes me think maybe they're not going to go back to playing like the Fox, but maybe get back to a little bit more of those roots of those Memphis days.
I think it's interesting stuff, man. And the thing that really grabs me about this room, both from the interior and the exterior, kind of the outside, is the versatility and the different body types. To me, I'm interested in the different combinations as for the defensive tackle combinations, defensive end combinations. Tomiwa, we're talking about Tomiwa Dorojaye, the West Virginia transfer. Yeah, I know. Easy peasy, brother. Thanks, man. Every now and then. He to me, when we watched him, I thought he actually popped more in the run game, crossing the face of the tackle. I think if you moved him into like a 3 technique, like having him like shoot gaps and get across the face of the guard, or there's a lot of interesting stunt and twist combinations, the things that you can do from like delayed blitzes. I think the strength of this defense is going to be in the secondary personally this year. So it's just going to be interesting how Adam Fuller adjusts from the strength being of your defensive front to now in the secondary. In my opinion, I'm not out there. There's a lot of interesting stuff that we can do. I think before we kind of start focusing mainly on the edges, Clay, did you have some Darrel Jackson footage that you guys had, some cut ups, some things like that we wanted to look at, or am I?
No.
Good.
I couldn't figure out the rest of it.
That's okay. Not a problem. Put the cut up in your mind. That's
ACC,
fine.
YouTube.
Archaic, disgusting. Hopefully we won't have to deal with it very much longer. Darrel Jackson's very good. Kev, do you have some film of any of the guys that we were talking about that we want to kind of peruse as we switch on talking to defensive ends? And Clay, I guess as Kevin's pulling up the footage, just quickly, any defensive tackle combinations, like any pairs that have really been popping to you in
without
practice?
giving away depth chart secrets?
I don't care where they're playing against, just 2 guys in tandem next to each other that look good.
I would say it's kind of harder with the depth chart stuff. It's harder to evaluate the defensive tackles together as compared to one defensive tackle and the defensive end on the same side.
Gotcha. Okay.
because they'll do like the stunt drills
Mhm.
and stuff. So they'll go in pairs for those.
All right, well, flip that.
And-
Who looks good? Which defensive tackle and defensive end pair look pretty cohesive to you then? Flip that if that's what we've seen more.
Anybody big on the defensive end, so whether it's Sione, Tomiwa, even sometimes Pat Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. I mean, they're not as heavy as the other two, but they can bull rush a little bit and hold the offensive tackle, like keep them busy, I guess. And
Right.
Grady Kelly, if Grady Kelly is on the interior, I mean, he just like it's around very quickly on the stunt. Wraps,
like
I don't
that.
know. So just anybody big that can really get in the chest of the offensive tackle, engage him and keep Grady Kelly free because he's quick. He's really quick. He's not as fast as Braden Fisk at all, but
60%.
60%, maybe more. So to be determined. He also doesn't have that great of production, so maybe I'm being fooled a little bit, but I know what I saw actually.
Trust your eyes,
There you
Finkus.
go.
Trust
I know
those
what I
people.
saw.
handle
So he's been balling. Yeah.
Kev, you got any film any of these guys we've been talking about that maybe just kind of look at that would illustrate what we're speaking on before we move on to defensive ends?
Yeah, I think we've done solo videos of all these guys, so I figure check those out. We'll put those videos down in the description. We do a nice long talk of basically all these guys we're talking about are transfers at this point, so we'll let you kind of enjoy the longer process in those videos.
I like that. Take a look. We've got breakdowns of all these guys, what we're talking about. Now let's move to the defensive ends. I think we've mentioned a lot of them by name. Adam, in your opinion, I think with the first, we've got
Tell us
Patrick,
about the defensive ends.
No. We've got Patrick Payton locked down. I know that you've got the trepidation. That is a very large exhale from you, as I mentioned this position group.
You're going to ask me about Marvin Jones Jr. and I'm not buying it.
I didn't say that, brother,
it.
man. Calm down. Calm down.
That's where you're going.
I'm not. You don't know me. I'm a Christopher Nolan movie. You can't read me, brother. I'm very complex. I want to say, outside of Patrick Payton, like who's Pat Payton's like running mate on the other side that you think would be a nice fit, and why is it clearly Marvin Jones Jr.?
I don't think there's a right answer. You've got a all conference type of player coming in from Oregon State and Sione that seems like a pretty good fit for what they want to do on base downs with being a light box defense and stopping the run. That seems like a natural fit to begin with. And then after that, it's like, it seems like, and again, I'm reading the practice reports and talking to some people. Like, I think that there's some encouraging things from Marvin Jones Jr., but I don't know if it's been consistent. Maybe the light bulb hasn't come on yet. I just want to hear more positivity about what he's got going on. And I mean, based on the production at Georgia, and again, there was a shoulder injury and, missing off seasons and that kind of stuff, and you weren't able to develop. Like, it's great. I've been listening. I listen to all kinds of podcasts and people talk about the team and all that kind of stuff, and hearing people rave about how he looks different and all this stuff. And I'm like, that all sounds good, but turn the tape on and it just hasn't looked like that yet. But again, he's his second year in college. He's missed all seasons. And so I'm waiting to hopefully hear that it's coming and the light bulbs come on and he's taking the next step, because that's who you really need to be your number 2 out there, because he possesses the highest upside.
But he's a 5-star from 247 AB. Yeah. And that's never.
Don't go.
Kev's anti-elite.
Oh, brother,
he's got to be a 3-star with moxie for to be a Kev man.
I think your answer. I think the answer is Sione, though, because scheme wise, the fit just makes sense.
Complement with the run game. Kev, I want to talk to Clay first. And I want to talk to you about schematically what we might see some shifts from Adam Fuller doing with this defense compared to what they did a lot of last year. But Clay, do you have a rebuttal to anything that Mr. Brown is saying? is there inconsistency right now with Marvin Jones Jr.'s game? Is the picture on the pass rushing front? Because I want to add some nuance here. I think we all believe this is going to be a very competent defensive end unit. We think it's going to be very deep. I think they're going to be stout against the run. And I think in a lot of ways where you saw Florida State get taken advantage of at the end of the 2022 season, a lot of those perimeter runs, I don't think teams are going to be able to get those many easy yards. Now, the spectacular like strip sacks and everything like that to be determined. But Clay, do you have similar feelings as Adam? You've seen these guys quite a bit, or do you think it's maybe a little bit much ado about nothing?
I think one of the bigger advantages that doesn't really manifest as much when you have two pretty dominant or clear starters like you did last year in Pat Payton and Jared Verse. They would do the thing where they would rest them, and they would put in Byron Turner and Gilbert at the same time.
Complete drop.
I think when you do that this year, they're not going to play. Whoever the starters are not going to play as much as Pat Payton and Jared Verse did last year. Like they're not. Like the defensive end room projects to be much better, even if at worst Byron Turner is in the 4 deep or the 2 deep rotation. He has another year under.
Right.
So it's pretty safe to say that overall the 4 deep is improved. They're going to be more spread out throughout the game. They're going to have more, they're not going to be as tired by the end of the game. So throughout the season. It's just going to be built upon from last season.
Right.
It doesn't really show up that much in practice, in a 2-hour practice. Maybe, the first day it was kind of nice to see them rotate, but when they rotate, the offense rotates. So they're never really getting the advantage of being fresh, which I think personally is going to be the biggest boost as opposed to having a 1A type of one of the top 5 in the country pass rusher like Jared Verse last year. I don't know if Patrick Payton can beat that. He had 44 pressures last year, which was probably ranked pretty high, but I guarantee that he and Jared Verse were top 3 in, pressure duo, combined pressures by a duo. That's a big deal. Like having Jared Verse on the other side, the eye test will tell you that. Like he draws a lot of attention. How will Patrick Payton be able to handle that? I think the added 15 pounds will help, but I think that's still to be determined. He's had nice moments in practice. I think he can take the step. He has a lot of the tools. Anybody can guess, really, I think. But as far as Marvin Jones, I agree on the film. I was not, especially as someone with zero. I didn't know who Shade Tree was until
you're a Kentucky man. It's all right.
Ago.
You're a Wildcat. It's okay. So you're looking at it completely.
So I have no emotional connection to him.
Spitting in the face of all Florida State fans. Very nice. Way to do yourself. Yeah.
I also was not here for his recruitment as a 5-star. I just looked at the film. And I didn't love it at the time. And I will say the best plays in practice, you get it. You get why he came here. He'll maybe set up he'll spin across the tackle's face, and it's just super, super quick and super agile, and he's really big. And, you do see those videos, and he does look different. It is true. He does look different, and he's really got really long arms. He's really well built. He moves really well. He's got all the tools. It's the inconsistency. So can he continue to stack good reps back to back? He has a good ability to bounce back. I think Brendan's written about that in a few practice reports. There's been a few instances where he might have a rough rep and he'll get matched up with the same player the next rep, and he'll have a great rep, maybe his best rep of the day. So can he build on that? And if he can, and he can start, I think that does change the defensive line. I think that can make them I don't know where the pass rush ranked last year, but I think that could propel them to close to last year's level of a pass rush.
Gotcha.
Trey, I wanted to add, I think the natural rebuttal here is that Pat Payton takes the next step, becomes an elite level player. I say elite, excellent player for ACC football for the
Right.
2024 team, because that's going to take pressure off of everybody else, and pressure off of everybody else means they don't have to be at their greatest at all times, and they can still be successful. So I think the natural rebuttal is Peyton taking the next step makes everybody around them much better.
And with Darrel Jackson taking the next step, but from what we've seen from him on film, it could be a meteoric next step with all the stuff that he's taking, a healthy Josh Farmer. And then the good thing about the other guys that you got matching up with like a Pat Payton or like a Marvin Jones, a guy who's really getting a chance for a lot of extended reps, is you've got a lot of like sure-handed veterans like Sione and guys like Grady Kelly to pair with him that know what they're doing, that have a ton of experience under their belt. So it's going to be interesting to watch him grow. If he kind of takes it, if this year for Marvin Jones Jr. is like Kyle Morlock's year last year, I think it might be more effective. But adjusting, growing, this is a kid that we think is going to be here for a couple years. How much investment are you going to put on him from a rep standpoint? And if he does hit, that does raise the ceiling of this defense from competent to like, if you could have with the secondary that we expect them to have, if you could have a very good to like an almost dominant defensive line. I mean, I don't know. Fuller's already making $2 million a year, but cash more checks, bro. I don't know. Like whatever you want. Kev, schematically, from all the stuff that we talked about, what do we? It's hard to project, right? But what do we kind of expect maybe some of the differences to be? Obviously, Adam Fuller had a great defensive line last year. He allowed them to control the game, natural pass rush, didn't have to do too much funky stuff. We will say from the second half of the Clemson game, we did see the aggression dialed up a little bit. What are you thinking in terms of that? Like, how do you see the potential of this unit, and how do you think that might affect what we might see philosophically or schematically from Florida State's defense in 2024? Caveat, this is like April 2nd, still a long ways away, but we're prognosticating for you because we love you.
Yeah, so I think if I go way back to Memphis days, they were they were pretty multiple, but I would say they kind of based out of cover 3. They based out of trying to get an extra man in the box, trying to get a little pressure, trying to do some like fire zone blitzes, trying to kind of mix up their pressures. Then they get to the ACC, and I think they saw a level of quarterback play that they weren't used to from the AAC. I think they knee-jerked into being a cover 4 team. They said, we're going to take away these RPOs that are like really popular. We're going to try to like shut down that particular aspect of what these ACC teams are going to throw at you. And at the time, like the ACC, you can say what you want about them, but they're a conference that generates pretty good quarterback play pretty consistently. So they were like, we're going to take the quarterbacks away. We're going to kind of do this light box idea where, we're going to devote more people to coverage and we're going to let them kind of run the ball. And they kind of stuck with that for a couple of years. They were getting better and better as time went on. But like you guys said, something clicked with the Clemson game, and they found the kind of identity of this team and potentially of this program moving forward, that like at Florida State, you can get defensive backs. Like in the state of Florida, defensive backs grow on trees. And so why don't we trust them in man coverage and bring a little bit more pressure? And so I think we're going to talk more about that in the defensive back video. But I do think that's going to be a little bit more their kind of MO. And realistically, when I'm talking schematically and I want to talk about the defensive tackles and defensive ends, the real big thing, and I think we've kind of circled around it, isn't necessarily how much pressure they're going to bring, but how do they mix and match their personnel groupings? If you look at Fuller's interviews, that's a big part of his conversations of how he's thinking about these games is, and like even like how he feels like he can improve is, I can be better at knowing what personnel to go in and what time. And we even saw, even within 247, there were some of us that were saying, why are we having these certain personnel on the defensive line and at this certain time? Why is Jared Verse not in at X time? Why is, whoever in at Y time?
A lot of threads on that. Yep.
Like that's an important thing. And that's the idea with how they're schematically going to use this defensive end is, tell me why going to be someone that you put in at defensive tackle on 3rd down. Could you have if you're worried about Marvin Jones Jr. and Patrick Payton generating a pass rush, maybe you have a situation where your 4 defensive linemen are Sione, Loloheia, and Tomiwa, and those are your 2 defensive tackles, and then you got MJJ outside and Patrick Payton. You essentially have 4 defensive ends on the field at one time. That's a lot of speed. You have a lot of flexibility, and I think that's where the schematic ideas are going to come in. How do you mix and match these body styles that we've alluded to throughout this episode?
It's interesting because it reminds me a lot when you're talking about that of how Mike Norvell likes to have all those matchups, all those different body types at receiver, running back with his different formations because he's playing matchup football. Sounds like Adam Fuller could really do that with this defensive line. And what's an antidote to, like, obviously the blueprint for success is be Georgia and have 9 million 5 stars, and you don't have to worry about it because everybody's like huge and freakish and does everything right. But what do you do with a room of really competent guys? Maybe not anybody that has the ceiling of a Jared Verse. We don't write off people like Pat Payton or things like that. But you got a lot of guys that do a couple of things really well. Do you try to make them all good at everything, or do you have a bunch of like specialists, right? Do you have a bunch of like guys that you try to make generally good, or do you just have specialists and put them in packages and situations that highlight their strengths and play on those strengths? It's an interesting thing. Do you make your strongest asset stronger? Or do you try to make everybody a well-rounded football player? I don't know. I think it's going to be fun to see. And I have a question for everybody as we wrap this up. Adam, it looks like you want to say something, so I'm going to let you do that first. So say something before I wrap
Yeah,
up.
I was just thinking, like, I'm just sitting here thinking about everything we're talking about, and like thinking about the schedule for 2024 and like trying to find what's the good passing attack that they're going to play next year. SMU, like,
I would
Yeah,
have said
they're at
Notre
last pick
Dame.
in
I would have said
pass
Notre
rush
Dame if
isn't
Riley
working
Leonard
against
didn't get hurt.
SMU. So
Yeah.
Memphis.
SMU.
So it seems like they built this team or this defensive line specifically to beat the 3 best or the 3 best teams you're going to play next year in Clemson, Miami, and Notre Dame. They're 3 run-heavy teams with big
No
packages.
matter what the down, no matter what time left in the game,
big
right?
packages. I mean, think about Miami. Miami's going to play some 12. They're going to play some big 11, and they're going to run duo right at you. Notre Dame's going to run 13, and they're going to run right at you.
With 8 million tight ends, yeah.
In perspective, it makes a boatload of sense of how big they decided to go and maybe not focus as heavily on the pass rushing aspect of the defensive line. It seems like they've got maybe a floor of pass rush, but not a high ceiling of it unless Marvin Jones takes off.
With the potential for a higher ceiling. The potential's there, which is important, I think.
Yeah. But in that context, it makes a lot of sense with why you went out and got a Tomiwa and a Sione and guys that on the edges are going to be able to hold up against these run games that they're going to see in the big games that they got to win.
So final question, based off what Mr. Fink said earlier. Mr. Fink says right now we could be looking at Grady Kelly as 60% of a Braden Fisk. In your opinion, the 2024 defensive line has right now, in your opinion, is going to be the what percent of the 2023 defensive line as a whole?
Oh, man.
Clay, I'm going to go with you third. Kev, I'm going to go with you first. The 2024 defensive line, based on what we know, which is super early, and it's probably additions, subtractions, things could happen. But right now, as everything stands from what you've heard and seen, the 2024 defensive line is going to be X percent of the 2023 defensive line's effectiveness.
So I'll rate this just because I'm excited about the NCAA football game coming out. I'll give it like a 0 to 100 score. Last year,
I like that. By
the end of the year, with Braden Fisk playing the way Braden Fisk was playing, which was elite, elite. Jared Verse playing elite. You've got Pat Payton. I mean, I'm giving that. I'm thinking they're like a 96, like 90, 97. There might be someone better out there, like a UGA that just has like people in every position, but like they're averaging a 96 on NCAA. Like that end of score, like you've got like Jared Verse at like a 98, 99, Braden Fisk at like a 97, 98.
Fabian Lovett, healthy Fabian Lovett too, like 92, 93.
Yeah,
right?
you're working with some stuff here. I think by season's end, I think Darrell Jackson's going to be up there in the high 90s. Personally, I think he's going to be a guy that you're putting up there.
Talk. This rules, dude. All right, so they're 96. Last year they were 96.
I think you're going to be hitting like a 93.
Oh, that's good. I feel like that's very
a 92. Like I don't know.
I like that.
Maybe that's a little high. I think Darrell Jackson be up there. I'm talking just starting. Like I think Darrell Jackson will be up there. I think Pat Payton's going to be, a low mid 90s guy. Yeah, low 90s probably. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's where I settle. So you're probably losing 4 or 5 points because you don't have Jared Verse. But I think by season's end, we're going to be liking what Darrell Jackson's given us.
I like that, dude. You're making me happy. Adam, what about you? You're stroking your beard. You're going to drop some very low-ass score, and everybody's going to be mad at you in the comments.
63.
Not my yeah, dude, D-. What do you think, Adam? I like Kev. The benchmark of last year was a 96 in NCAA college football. The 2024 defensive line is going to be rated a blank.
Like a 85, 86. I don't think there's going to be a huge, massive drop off. I just don't think.
Like you don't think they're a weakness?
No.
They'll be competent to get. They'll be very good.
There's still a strength of the team. There's still a strength of the team. I don't think the ceiling is there. Like we talk about Fabian. Like Fabian at his best is a really damn good football player.
Sure.
Braden Fisk is a player they just don't have on this roster this year. He's going to be a second round draft pick most likely, maybe back of the first, probably second round though. Jared Verse is a top 20 pick. Like that doesn't exist on this roster. So at some point you're taking a step back, but I do think that potentially you're going to be better just because you're not better, but you're going to be close to as good because you have more depth on like the edges, and the drop off there was pretty big last year. And I think they're going to go get another D tackle out of the portal after spring's over, and bring somebody in to help out there too. So
okay, that would be nice. I could shift our ratings. Talk to us later as we keep these ratings. Clay, what about you, big guy? You're a young one. I know you're a gamer. Actually, dude, when was the last? Have you ever played NCAA football?
Are you even alive for that?
I've played it one time. My friend has it. I didn't even have an Xbox. It was literally months before I got an Xbox.
How did you go
when it came out?
Not hearing of Florida State to doing this? I don't know.
You're going to have fun. You wait till that game comes out. As long as EA's probably going to screw it up, but
I'm very excited. I'm very excited. I've tried to get some, but every time I check, I feel like the price is going up on Amazon. It's like 200 plus.
Price of the brick went up, my man. Absolutely. If you can, I always like 2004 with, I think Carson Palmer was on the cover. I like that one. Play Virginia Tech, Kevin Jones, Lee Suggs, very fun backfield, or Kansas State, L. Roberson, Darren Sproles. I digress. Those are two of my favorite video game teams of all time.
Good time.
And then with Virginia Tech, you put in Marcus Vick, Michael Vick's brother. Couldn't throw, but they gave him 99 speed. Anyway, the fans don't want to hear about that. Yeah, I know. Just food for thought. What is your rating of the 2024 Florida State defensive line from what you've seen so far?
I think I would probably say that 23 was a few points lower. If we're talking run in pass, I assume. I don't know.
Sure, yeah.
I think there was some, left on the table. Even Braden Fisk at his best, there's plays where you don't really know what his arms are doing in the run game. He's kind of just getting getting pushed around, and he's a smaller guy, so that's going to happen, and that could happen with Grady Kelly. Who knows? But I think the run defense is going to be a lot better, and I think the pass rush is not going to take a significant drop off. I think it's probably, I would say that 2023 was maybe like a 92 or 93.
Okay.
And I would say that this 2024 is maybe like an 85, 86.
Interesting. I like that. Well, that's good. I think I'm gonna split the baby, and I think I'm gonna go 89 or like 90. I think right now. I'm all in on the depth, the combinations, the versatility, and it might be one of those things where the sum of the entire group is more than just the equal parts. Like the combined effort you get is not going to just be adding up all their individual player ratings. I think they're going to play kind of like how I feel the offense is going to play this year. I think cohesively they're gonna have a really nice final product. But somebody that's always a 100 overall. That's you guys. As long as you're subscribed to Noles 24/7, that is, and this YouTube channel, you better. Because if you're not, subscribe, notifications on. We've got more previews. We've got more special guests like our guy, Mr. Fink. I had a great time. Clay, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, man. We'll have you on anytime. For Kevin, for Adam, for myself, for the Finkus. It's me, Trey Rowland, X's and Noles, presented by Noles247.com. Stick with us for all of your hot spring action and keep chopping.